Okay, how you guys doing? How's everybody doing? We're freaking out. You guys freaking out? Okay, all right, okay. I'm gonna give you guys some advice around scope is figuring out what is really just not necessary for this and for your shots. And only really focus on the things that are. This is okay for your first run at something like this. This is where we kind of learn some harder lessons, really. So it's okay if it's not feeling as done as you know in your heart it could be if you just had all of the time, right? So I want to hear from you a little bit. What's got you most concerned currently? Nothing? Really?
Particles, using particles
Mhm.
and everything after finishing
Mhm.
everything on time, and then using all the particles and VSX stuff.
All the particles. Okay. I mean, a particle system, maybe not necessary, but it'd be cool, right? It's like, yeah. So then it's about figuring out whether or not it's a priority to have it. I can't tell you how many games or projects I've been on that just didn't get everything we planned on it having in it. That's literally every game I've ever worked on, and not get everything we thought it would have in it. Okay, getting everything done and in on time. All right. What's another one? Anything else? Okay. Wow, okay. That's it. That's actually pretty good. But also, if maybe there's something that is concerning you that you don't want in a recording, please reach out to myself or Chris. And we can talk on the side about what other possible challenges or hurdles you might be facing for this project, right? Now, I am not going to require, I think, your undivided attention on this next demo, right? I am going to be showing you just a little bit more camera rendering and sequencer edit stuff today. And it's for your reference. It's for you to reach out, reach to, on Canvas to have some more tools for your final, right? Okay, so I'm going to start with this scene that's one of my more developed scenes in terms of just like what I have handy right now. And that's why we're using it. If you've had me in 225, you might recognize this, but this has more to do with, I think, demonstrating what you can do with the sequencer for your finals render for that stuff, right? So I'm going to start by clicking add level sequence to this. And let's go to my resident new projects. Level sequences. That's a loud fan. It's kind of weird. Go there, and we're gonna call this camera demo sequencer. Okay.
What's it doing? It must be turning your heat on.
I mean, maybe it is kind of chilly out. Okay. So now we know how we may have had a few different shots that you want to add to your sequence. You probably already have some cameras in your scene, hopefully by now. So let's go ahead and start by just dropping in a camera. I'm going to use the Cine Camera Actor for obvious reasons. And I think some of us might have a little bit of, I don't know, trouble with managing the toggling of a camera view, its piloted view, and also the game view, in which like we're kind of managing this as we're trying to navigate that space. So what I often prefer to do is to go up to Window and then use viewport and add a second viewport, right? So that one of them can be my fixed camera and the other one can be the navigation space, right? That's my preferred way to work here. It's not important that you do that, but it might be helpful to you. So that is a tip. On this guy, I'm going to click over here to Cine Camera Actor. And that is us understanding that that's where it is. And now notice how as I navigate the space, the camera is moving by ghost. We have a ghost camera happening. All right. I've made a shot. So you can see that on the left, if I navigate the space, it's actually changing the camera. On the right, no, not so much. So that is very helpful to me. I actually appreciate that. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this camera actor on into my sequencer, and we know what's happening here. It's making 150, that's 5 seconds of footage, 150, 30 frames per second. Yep, 5 seconds. Remember, by default, 30 frames per second. So every 30 is 1 second. That's what we're looking at. So here to here is 1, 2, 3, and so on. Okay, now I want to make my camera move. Some of you know this. This is a refresher. Some of you weren't sure, or maybe just would like to a hand walk through this again. That's okay. So what we're going to do is I'm going to actually take that camera. Oh, eject out of that. I'm going to take that camera and I'm going to keyframe it to have some movement here. I want it to move slowly forward down the hall. Maybe I want it to be kind of menacing. So I'm going to maybe like look up a little bit. Yeah, that's the shot. Feeling very, I don't know, filmmaker that this reminds me of. Yeah, like little Wes Anderson-y in the symmetry of it, maybe, but he would be yeah, he'd be panning. And there's not enough pink and green for that, right? But this feels a little, I don't know, maybe Stanley Kubrick and its creepy weirdness. I don't know. Very red rum, red door. I don't know. Hitchcock. The Shining, yes, Stanley Kubrick. Yeah, it feels a little of that. And we're gonna play with that a little bit. We don't have anything in here to do the Kubrick stare, but we are gonna play around with a dolly zoom. I don't have anything bloody in the scene, I mean, okay? But let's say that I want to move my camera to behave a little like this, right? Over 5 seconds. I just want it to move slowly forward, okay? So I'm gonna keyframe this while I have my camera here in this viewport. I'm gonna turn on the camera view. And over here, you can just be regular view. Please just be my regular camera actor. I don't really want, there we go. Viewport, okay. This is kind of what I mean about it's being a little fidgety. Sometimes you gotta like toggle it to get what I want. Over here is what I want this to be live though. So that way it's showing live as I'm editing, okay? So what I'm gonna do now is with the camera selected, Cine camera actor selected, let's take a look at these two components that are children to the parent of the camera. And we have camera component, where we can keyframe things like the aperture and the focal length, which you guys are total experts on now. Or you can actually keyframe the transform of the camera. And hopefully you're also experts on that too. That's your move and rotate and scale and stuff. So if you want to physically move your camera through space, we're just going to click on what you would like to keyframe. Now, if you click keyframe of the entire transform, that's all of the values. It's position, it's rotation, there's like really a scale, but yeah, I guess there is a scale here. Yeah, it's a scale component, but it won't work like this on a camera. But that's the reason for this though, is because in the sequencer, you can actually animate anything, not just cameras. So that's why that kind of exists here. So I've keyframed it to be here, but now I'm going to scrub forward in 5 seconds. And make sure that I am in a default view. Right? And over here, I'm going to push my camera forward just a little bit. About maybe there. Maybe that's as far as I want it to move. Maybe a little forward. It's going to be slow. I'm going to transform it again right there. Give it a little keyframe. So now it's moving from here to here in 5 seconds. Let's give it a little test. All right, that gives it some movement. Now there's something kind of bothersome about this camera right now. I don't know, did you guys notice it not feeling very good for movement? Maybe it feels fine to you guys, and then these things are subjective, really. But I didn't love it. When I hit play, it like starts from a stop, ramps up to a speed, and then slows down again, which maybe you like how that feels, and that's okay. But it'd be nice maybe if we got a cut of the camera just moving like a proper clip, like some of the clips that you were working with on the sports exercise for the edits, right? Yeah. So how can I mess with that? This like slow in, slow out animation thing. Well, if I click on this little graph right here that shows animation curve, we should see the camera, excuse me, transform, there we go. The slow in, slow out curve right here. And so I can make this a straight line and it'll maintain the same speed instead. So how's about I select you and I just kind of straighten this out a little bit. Sorry. Ooh. There. And I think I can actually, there is a tool here that I can remove. Yeah. Linear. There we go. Linear. Right click, linear. Yeah, it's perfect. Okay. So now, hopefully, when I hit play, it should just be moving instead of slow in, slow out, right? Let's hit play. Yeah, it's just moving. Just move. And then it just keeps moving and then done. Lovely. Okay. Now, yes.
Did I jump in on
You
that?
may jump in. You may jump in.
Why would you not want to include that movement just like that in your video?
I don't know.
Because linear start stops
Mhm.
very natural, right?
Yeah.
There's a guy carrying a camera or anyone would have some sort of linear interpolation,
Mhm.
but not linear interpolation. But why doesn't this matter? Because you don't have to use the whole shot.
Yeah, you don't.
So you want 5 seconds of camera moving at a nice steady pace.
Right.
That you're gonna dissolve out to, something like that. Do a 10-second shot
Mm-hmm.
and have it go further than. you want.
Yes.
And that way you can take the good part, leave the rest.
That's actually what I was going to follow up with.
Sorry.
Is that no, that's actually kind of excellent. Because the answer to that or a follow-up to that is if you don't want it to be that hard cut, is that you do include the slow in, slow out, but make the cut longer. And the slow in, slow out still exists, but it's so much more subtle that there is a kind of natural feel to it that technically feels better. So knowing this now, you guys, you would probably do a cut like this, make it feel how you'd want that shot to go. And then what would we do? Export it. You're going to export this one render. And now you've got sort of, you're starting to build up cuts that you can edit in either After Effects or in our case, Premiere Pro. Okay. Now, yes, you
Great
don't, After Effects is a little bit more beastlier than Premiere Pro. So maybe we don't use that.
How much?
True.
Great.
So now we're kind of coming into the conversation about like, what tools should we use? That is the question. So I'm going to show you some stuff in Sequencer today that you cannot do in Premiere Pro. And yeah, you can make some cuts in here pretty quickly. But what's happening in the Sequencer is mostly animation and Unreal based features that you can do. Now, well, yeah, that kind of makes sense actually, because it's pretty much the only reason we've been using this. But you can add additional cameras to sequence out several cuts and edit within Sequencer, which in and of itself is doable, but Premiere Pro technically does better. You have a lot more features with that. The fade in, fade out tracks, the time dilation, this exists in Unreal, but it's kind of a lot of resources to do the same thing that Premiere Pro just does better. Right. So,
Yeah, you could
right.
just do
Right.
it fast and more easily.
right.
You can accomplish all those things. You could look up every word that you write and see if it's spelled correctly and look it up in the dictionary,
Mhm.
not on paper, or you could just run spell check.
Yeah. So the question is then like, well, what do we really use out in industry? I would say that we use pretty much exclusively Sequencer if all of these animations and cuts exist in game. But if we're cutting for a trailer or if we're cutting for marketing materials, nope. That will be done in Premiere Pro and After Effects almost exclusively. So those are kind of the two different cases which you would actually use both of these editors. And it's very common to toggle and jump between the two of them. In your case, you are kind of making marketing materials for yourself, for your own career, for your brand, whatever that might mean for you. So I'm probably going to recommend that you make cuts here, render them, and then edit them in Premiere Pro. But Chris and I had a philosophical conversation about this. Is there anything wrong with using the tool that you feel most comfortable in? No, absolutely not. If you're feeling the most comfortable in Sequencer and you'd rather do it all there, fine. That's absolutely fine. If you're feeling most comfortable just getting some quick shots out of Sequencer, just getting the heck out of Unreal because you want to go back to Premiere Pro, that's okay too. That is okay too. However, There are some things though, that if you want for your cuts, we have to do in sequencer. And some of that is animating cameras that like I showed you here. And now I'm going to show you how to animate camera features and camera components, like changing the depth of field and the FOV on keyframe, which is really fun, actually, really fun. I remember showing you this and you were like, oh, that's kind of cheating. But that's the fun stuff. That's the fun stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
That's why we have these machines.
Right.
To help us do things more easily.
Absolutely. Okay,
Yeah,
so
which is not to say you couldn't simulate doing that in Premiere or
Yeah.
After Effects, but then you'd be using masks and you'd be fake doing it, you'd be iPhoning it in and
Mm.
all of this. Whereas, hey, you just want to do a rack focus, well, just animate the aperture or animate the focus.
yeah. I am gonna bring in and tumble a cone. I think we agreed that the cone is like maybe the most readable of the primitives. Maybe a cylinder,
Or-
maybe.
or you turn on its axis.
Yeah, yeah, a cube turned on it would also work, but we needed something that had some shading to it. The sphere was a little difficult because it's kind of shaded all over the same. And so, yeah, this will help us kind of see, hopefully see what we need to do. Let's see if I can get that there. There we go. Okay. All right. So first thing I'm going to do before I animate anything on these is I'm going to get the shot, I think the field of the FOV more correct. So let's go to the camera. FOV, you know, the focal length at 35 is okay. I think I like 45 a little bit better. I think that's kind of close to the human eye is 45. But like if I were to just kind of go a little aggressive about it, this is what I'm talking about. This is a kind of zoom. And the further away, this feels kind of eerie, right? Things feel farther away than they are. So I'm gonna put it about here. And now, right over here, I can adjust, I think the focal distance, right, to get the depth of field closer to how I want. So I'm going to do that right here. I'm going to just kind of adjust the focal distance to hopefully something that is going to put, this is where I need you, Chris. I don't know how to get a nice crispy, we drop the aperture length to 1. No. Yeah, that was it.
To really affect depth of field too harshly.
The lighting is a little bit, okay, yeah, you're right. You're right.
Move the camera back and zoom in, then you'll start to compromise your depth.
Yeah, that's what we need to do. We need to move the camera back and then we're going to focal length a little closer. Yeah, there we go. There we go. I'm going to move it up too, just because I like it in the shot. Now, what I'd like to do, have you ever noticed this? So maybe you see a shot, it's a still shot, right? And then it goes from one focus to another, and it kind of draws attention to what matters or what's important, right? Like we want to look at something far away and then we want to see the actor's reaction to it or something like that, right? That's kind of what we're trying to do here, okay? So
In the biz, it's called a rack focus.
yeah, rack focus. That's cool. Sure. I'm actually gonna remove these keyframes because it's getting in the way of my demonstration. You can select a keyframe and delete them. How nice is that? Yeah. Okay. Now, let's get the focal length. Nope, the focal length was fine. Thank you, 70, nice round number. And the focal distance, camera, we are going to change to be a smaller number. I think we were looking at, what's 500? There we go. Okay, so this is what I want to do. I want to change the focus from my object to the background. So I'm going to keyframe at 500 in 1 second. And within, I'd say maybe, let's say 3 seconds. In 3 seconds, I want it to transfer to the backside. And let's put that at 1,000. Nah, more. 10,000. Yeah. Think I'm getting there? Okay. I'm gonna also move the keyframe over slightly. so that it's at least in focus for a second, and then changes focus in 3 seconds, and then it stays there for another second. That's what I'm gonna go with right now. All right, so yeah, that's what we wanted to do. Ooh, that's cool. Okay, so I'm gonna hit play. Yeah, that's a kind of nice dramatic moment. I can see this working for you in a really nice way. If you have, say, maybe a prop in your scene that you think is really cool, and it's maybe staged in your environment at a nice angle, so you can kind of take that shot of like, look at this gorgeous environment, and then my beautiful coffee cup or whatever it is you're making. Okay, all right. Now, just like the focal length, you can also adjust, I mean, just like the focal distance, you can also adjust the focal length. Meaning if you wanted it to feel like everything looks kind of normal and then it goes super weird, super zoomed in, we can actually keyframe that as well. So how's about, I will keyframe the focal length to be 70 right there. And then in a few seconds, I don't know, let's go down. We're zooming out. So 45. And I'm gonna remove the focal distance now. Like we don't really need to worry about that. Okay. So like you can actually zoom in. You can maybe even see a way for, like if we flipped that, to zoom in onto something that you would really like to pull your viewer into, especially if your environment tells any kind of story. I'm not requiring that of you in this class, right? But you could see where, oh, I really need you to like see the gun on the table. Like we really need you to see that, right? Okay. Okay. Now I want to show you how to kind of queue up for, I think, tighter renders. So the rendering pipeline in Unreal is a little bit intense, which is why when we do quick cuts in progress, how you've been rendering is appropriate. And it's actually technically fine for what you're doing, but you might want to do some anti-alias passing on it, or just some like resolution stuff that, or even pre-warm-up stuff. Have you ever noticed where you're like, I'm rendering the thing, but I have to wait like 3 or 4 seconds of rendering before everything pops in, right? This is the render queue pipeline that you'll want to be using moving forward, at least for that good stuff. So to do this, we actually have to turn on a plugin, which is why it's just so much extra work. We'll go to settings. Where's the plugin manager? Move my head out of the way. Plugins. There we go. And I think it's render movie queue. Oops, spell render correctly. That's your first thing you want to do. Render movie queue. Just the one. Turn that on, and it's like, hey, you need to restart. Totally. Restart now. Yes, save my work, and let it think for a second. And now the feature will be present for you. Whee! Fun, fun, fun. Any questions so far? All right, cool. Can you see yourself maybe using some of these features in your, all right, cool. Something to feel good, something to feel a little stronger in your work. Okay. Yeah, get it. All right, so now let's go to render movie queue. Movie queue render. There it is. Yeah, there we go. All right, so what we want to do is we want to add a new sort of render stack to this. We're going to add render. Camera demo is the sequencer in which that we are rendering. And then in the unsaved configuration is where we can add some fun stuff. Now, this is where we actually add and change the format, right? The JPEG for batch renders are fine, which you can bring into Premiere Pro pretty quickly. But if you'd rather like switch to a proper export, let's like video export, file export, we can add a setting. And right in here, you can select what type of file you'd like to actually export, and we turn that on. Final Cut Pro, encoder.
It's just a
No. What about EXR, 16-bit? Okay, so not that.
Yeah, that's not actually video. That's just.
These are export types, but
Data.
yeah, we don't want
So
to.
you could do a PNG sequence, just be a bunch of PNGs.
Yeah, I think I guess so.
You wanna-
Yeah.
Did it say tip sequence was an option?
Movie pipeline image output. Sorry, I think is what I was doing before.
And like,
Command line
oh,
encoder. We don't want that.
There's no export with.
That's really
view.
interesting because there was before. And I'm not sure what's missing on that now. I'm gonna do a little bit more research on that.
The whole sequencer. I don't know.
No, I got the whole sequencer there. What's there?
Recipe?
Don't know, that's weird. No, but okay, so but like look at some of these other cool things though. Anti-aliasing. Spatial sampling. You do want to bump this number up to get a tighter anti-aliasing effect, but every number you go up is exponential. Do not go up more than like 3. 2 is probably sufficient. And you can do a test render if you want to. Also, keep in mind that the more of these features you add will add time to your rendering pipeline and take time for that. So, you know, you want to be careful here. But I mean, what's the output do?
Yeah, what's the output setting for? Is that for anti-aliasing or that?
This is for anti-aliasing,
For the
what I have
that-
selected.
Oh,
Where it
there's your video,
goes.
There's your. video.
Oh, there we go. That's interesting that it
it's like
changed the
it's-
format.
You're gonna probably have video and PNG and JPEG sequences.
Well, this should, this is where it's going, file format, it's still
Oh,
PNG.
I see. What happens if you turn both those off? Will it just the default, turn off the JPEG and the PNG?
No,
See, now will it just do video? Maybe, I think, yeah.
we could try it. Let's just try it. Okay,
All
right.
Sort of like add-ons, sex.
okay, but let me show them the anti-aliasing.
Yeah, no, I
Okay,
just saw that.
all right, so let's bump up the spatial sample count to 2, maybe 3. You can do an override of your anti-aliasing to a different method if you would prefer some of these others. The multi-sample anti-aliasing is my preferred, but I wouldn't go too crazy here. If you'd like to play with this, by all means. I'm gonna go to settings now, and what we can do, let's see, color output, debug options, game over, high resolution, yeah, tile count. So you can actually increase resolution of like textures and stuff here if you'd like to. You probably don't need to what you're doing right now. And deferred lighting, reflections. You can do some other deferred. I'm gonna do detail lighting. Yeah, you just turn it on. Woo. Include alphas. All right, I'm gonna accept all that. And let's do a little render. Local. You can actually set up remote rendering to a more powerful computer. That's actually what the remote option was, which is kind of nice if you're working on the go here. But we should have a pretty nice sort of output here. You can. Yeah, you can. You can is the short answer. Oh, compiling shaders. Takes a little longer. Notice that?
No shot. Is that what you named it?
No,
Oh, interesting.
maybe I'm missing something, but it's still processing shader. We'll see what it says. Because like right now, it's not started any of the frames here. But maybe I failed to name an actor somewhere that's pulling that from, like a null reference.
Lapse time per second is a lie.
I think you're right, but it hasn't started rendering yet. It's still processing shaders. So
Should be a calculator.
I'm gonna pause this while it thinks. Hopefully that way you don't need to like sit through all this here. When I saved it, I lost my camera in my sequencer, so I set up a new one. Let's save everything really quick. Save scene, save sequencer, save. Project, save all, save. Okay, so let's try this guy again. Hopefully that will be enough to solve it because it's still the same sequencer. Here we go. Now we've got some movement here. That was working.
Do you have the sequence, the JPEG sequence on or off?
I have them on. We can try them again with off just to
Yeah.
see.
It's-
Yeah.
Just-
Sure. Okay, let's look. There they are. There's my batch render. There's my batch render. I don't see one of that. No. In a new folder. New folder. Batch render. But like honestly, a batch render will convert to a video file in a Premiere Pro very quickly, very easily.
Yeah.
Yep. Which it does, yeah. So let's try that for funsies where we were doing it without telling it what to do, just to see if it gave us a different file type. Render, or does it break? Or it just gives us some other default, like whatever. I mean, it's rendering.
See what it gets us. Well, I mean, there were settings there, so sure, give us
Mhm.
whatever those settings were. I'm guessing that before by default.
Nothing. It gave us nothing. Yeah, well, I mean, that makes sense because it doesn't have.
Does it have a different output? I'm just curious why you have to do a sequence, I guess, because it's an animation program.
Meaning EXR, compression type, and let's turn that off. Let's look at Final Cut Pro.
Well, that's just the DDL.
Yeah, that's not gonna be helpful.
That's an XML file.
I wonder if there was a setting. No. We don't want that. Let me see, burn-in.
Burn-in's like a time code with no burn.
Oh, we don't want that.
I'm assuming, unless it's another meaning of burn-in. That's the problem. You gotta be careful of that ambiguity.
Say aliasing.
Can you look at what the output settings are again?
Output.
Yeah.
There you go.
I gotta get up there.
Sure, play with it.
Output. Yeah, you're right. There's no, look at that. It's giving to a 24 frame output.
It can, if you do custom frame rate, you can actually select a different. So fun fact though, guys, if you want it to feel a lot more like computer graphics, rendering from a 30 frames per second or 60 frames per second is going to feel more like a video game. If you want it to feel like film, like movies, and I don't mean old movies necessarily, but movies, right? 24 frames per second was the standard. If you want it to have more of a cinematic feel, more of like a physical camera feel, switch to 24 frames per second. I can actually probably show you some decent resources that cover this.
They still use that frame rate.
Oh yeah,
Thanks
yeah.
to the high. Peter Jackson experimented with the high frame rate and nobody liked it.
It didn't feel good.
Didn't feel like a movie.
Cause like
They were watching like a webcam or something because it was too realistic.
yeah, it does feel kind of, everybody switched to 30 frames per second. I think I remember when it happened back when I was a wee lass. We noticed that films were feeling cheaper for some reason. They kind of felt like soap operas or something. We didn't like it. People did have kind of pushback.
It's a big
But
television runs in the United States at 30 frames per second.
right.
Well, it did until we got to digital TV, and then you can pick any frame rate you want, but it's still pretty much 29.97 frames per second or 50.94.
I was frame smoothing and like having higher frames made it so well.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Yeah, your refresh rate being higher looks more like television because for decades we've watched television at 30 frames per second in the United States. That's why also in Europe, their TV and their film look a lot more similar because Cal,
Here you go.
so he says 25 frames.
24 looks better.
24
Well-
looks more like traditional cinema. So as you've been conditioned over your lifetime to watch movies,
Right.
that looks like the real.
I want to push back on your vocabulary. You said 24 frames looks better. That is subjective. What looks better to someone doesn't necessarily look better to someone else. So I'm trying to be very careful in how I use that phrase, in that If you want it to feel more cinematic, more like a physical camera in nature, 24 frames per second is what you want. Sometimes people want 60 frames per second or 30 frames per second if you want this to feel more like a video game, if you want it to feel a little bit more like that interactivity. There's just a different sort of fan base or a different fandom there. So I am never going to tell you, well, I won't say never. Sometimes I tell you what I think looks better. But in this case, it's a very intentional decision, whatever it is, right? I think it feels better, and if I like how cinematic feels. I might be showing my age a little bit, but I'm gonna share with you guys this Will Foucher breakdown. It's just like a 30-minute talk about how to make it feel more cinematic, and he does some pretty cool stuff. So I'm gonna share this with you guys because I love you, and I think it works best in resources here. Hey, now. Adding. Oh, weird. How to make cinematic. But that is essentially the pipeline, right? YouTube. That is the pipeline for rendering tighter, better quality renders out of Unreal, is using the plugin process versus the quick shot. Quick shot rendering from the sequencer is fantastic for fast blocking, for like progress as you're figuring out what you want these cuts to be. But hopefully now you know what you want your shots to be, so you're understanding that. But this is the process right up here, this guy. We can add anti-aliasing, higher resolution overrides, deferred rendering for higher lighting. But play with these, right? If you prefer, again, like we had talked philosophically before, like I'm more comfortable rendering out of the sequencer and I like how they look. Okay, that's okay. You can do that. I still want to show you where you can find more beastly render settings. Okay. All right. We have about an hour and 20 in class left, and I don't want to talk your ear off on this topic. I really want you to have time to meet with your team. Next.
Someone to talk their off about this topic.
I certainly can. We know that. But let's let them work in peace and quiet. So I'm going to save this for you guys. And I'll be posting this recording now.